Hello everyone, this is Charlie from the Bloomingdale Public Library, and today we're going to be discussing how to customize Windows. Before we get started, just a few things. First of all, I'm on a Windows 10 laptop, so everything we cover here will work for Windows 10. However, most of it will also work for Windows 11. Things are just going to be renamed or reorganized a little differently. A second thing, this is intended to be a beginner's video, so we probably won't stray too far from the Windows settings. If you are brave and knowledgeable, you can do things with the Windows registry and policies and actually turn Windows into a completely different beast. But again, not what we're doing today. One final bit is just to keep things focused. I'm going to focus on the user experience. In other words, we're going to be looking at colors, menus, and things like that. And we're not going to be customizing things like backups and scheduling virus updates and synchronizing, anything like that. We're going to stick to the user experience. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first group of options we're going to look at fall under the heading of ease of access, or in Windows 11 they call it accessibility. Ease of access options help compensate for impairment like poor eyesight, hearing, and poor motor skills. Windows 11 categorizes these options under accessibility, but most of these options are largely the same, just organized a little bit differently. It's good to be aware of these settings, even if you don't have any disabilities. You might find some of these settings will still enhance your experience. Some are useful in the case of hardware failure, like a bad mouse or keyboard. And then other options you might stumble into accidentally by hitting shortcut keys. And I'm mostly referring to filter keys and sticky keys, which completely change the way your keyboard works. There's a couple of ways to access the ease of access options. The first and most obvious way is through the Start menu. So you click on the Windows icon, click on Settings, and then on the settings screen you see ease of access right here. You can also access ease of access on the lock screen or sign-in screen. You'll see this little icon here in the lower right corner. On Windows 11, it's a little outline of a human instead. And again, besides those two places, you might also stumble into a shortcut or two, which can be enabled and disabled in the settings. Let's go ahead and click on Ease of Access. Here you can see the various headings for the Ease of Access options. They're all listed on the left here. We'll have a look at most of them. We'll start off with Display. Under Display, we have a couple of options here. We have a slider to make the text bigger. You can see the effect in the sample text field right above. Once you have something you like, just go ahead and hit Apply. And sure enough, all the text becomes bigger. This may not work for all apps, but see I pull up Firefox, it seems to be just fine. Below that, we have another option to make everything bigger. And this is multiplicative with the text slider. And you can see this is also already set to 125%. It just makes it easier for some of the older patrons to use their laptops. If we go ahead and set this to 150, you see everything becomes bigger still. I'm going to go ahead and reset everything. And move on down the screen here. You see we have the brightness slider here. I don't believe that shows up on the recording. There's actually a lot of places you can change your brightness, but this is one of them. Beneath that, you see a reference to a night light option, which I plan on looking at a little bit later. And then below that, we have more options for things like animations and transparency, which may or may not be useful to you, but for older computers particularly, it might give you a little extra necessary processing power. Last option here is the Show Desktop Background Image. If you turn that off, sure enough, your image is gone. There might be a situation where that is useful. Moving down the line here, we'll go to the mouse pointer options. I'm going to click on that guy. I will tell you right now, these options do not show up in the recording, but just to go over them, we have a slider for changing the size of your pointer. We've got different style options. You can go from white on black to black on white to inverted, which is particularly cool, but might be a little too distracting to use effectively. And then this last option here is to change the color of your mouse pointer. There's a few more other options here which are for touch screens. Next is the text cursor. The text cursor is that little barbell shape that goes between the letters when you are in a word processor. So if I turn that on, we'll have a look at that in another app in just a sec. You can see below the sample text here, we've got a slider for changing the size and some options for changing the colors. You can even choose a custom color if you want. Not going to do that now. You can also change the thickness of the cursor, which I wouldn't make it too thick because it's supposed to represent a position between the characters, and as you can see at 20 here, it's the size of 2.5 characters, which might be a little confusing. I'm going to go ahead and open up Notepad here, just to show you when I start typing here. Sure enough, we've got the barbell in effect. I am going to set that back to purple and turn it off. Next customization option is the magnifier. I'm going to go ahead and click on the magnifier heading, click on the toggle, and sure enough, everything is magnified. If you can find it, there's a little control panel here for the magnifier. The plus symbol will increase the magnification. The minus symbol will decrease it. There's also some more controls to the right of that, and these are for the narrator. If you click on the mouse pointer with the speaker here, then click on some text, it's going to start reading.
Of your display. Magnifier can run in full screen.
The pause button will shut up the narrator. We also have a back and forward button to jump back and forth in the text. The setting icon is for the narrator. We have a speed and a voice set of options here. There's a whole bunch more elsewhere in the settings, which we'll have a brief look at just a bit later. To get out of the magnifier, just hit the close icon here. If you have trouble finding that, the shortcut is Windows symbol escape key. So below that, there's a bunch more options. You can change the default zoom level. You can change the zoom increments, which 100 is kind of high, so I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to do that. There's a whole bunch more options for you to change how the magnifier works, but we're going to move on. Next heading is color filters. This is for if you have some form of color blindness. So I'm going to go ahead and just toggle that on, and you should note that the taskbar is now in grayscale. You can also invert the colors, which is a kind of neat effect, but if you're looking at images of real life objects, that could be kind of confusing. We also have grayscale inverted, which takes what we had before with grayscale and flips that around. Below that, we've got other helpful settings for those with color blindness. We've got green weak, red weak, and then tritanopia. I'm sure I got that just right. And you can see the wheel down here and use that for reference. Just make sure you can see each individual slice of pie, and you're good. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for now. And look at the next option, which is high contrast. So even if you don't have a form of color blindness, high contrast can be helpful if you have eye strain, or maybe you just want to use it to relax your eyes a bit. I'll go ahead and toggle that on. And this is what we start off with. There's some other high contrast themes. If you wanted to have a look at those, high contrast black, high contrast white, and a few others. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And next is the narrator. We already had a listen to what it sounds like. Again, you just toggle it on.
Narrator dialog. OK. Button. Alt plus O. Heads up. Narrator keyboard changes. We've updated the narrator. Exiting narrator.
Because it makes it very hard to do a recording with another voice talking over you. But like I said before, if you scroll down, there is a whole lot of options here for changing the speed, the pitch, the voice, and many other options. But if the narrator is going to be the voice of your computing and the voice of the internet, you definitely want to take some time and make sure that it's something that you can actually listen to and works for you. Moving on, we've got audio. Honestly, not too much to do here, but you do have the volume slider. This is just one of about a half dozen places you can find that. You've got a toggle for mono audio, which, like it says, combines the left and right audio channels. This can be particularly useful if you're listening to stereo content and it's not recorded properly, and for whatever reason all the content is mostly coming out of one channel. You can turn this on and get full volume out of both channels. And then we have show audio alerts visually, which will just give you a flashing alert that you received a notification. And if you click on the drop-down menu here, you see your various flashing options. After that, we have closed captions. There's honestly nothing to really toggle on here, but you do have lots of customizations for your Windows closed captions. If you look at the sample text here, I'll change white to red. There you go. Change transparency to transparent, and it disappears. I don't know why you would do that. But if you scroll down, you can see you've got a bunch more options for customizing your Windows closed captions. Next heading is speech. This is where you can do voice to text, and you can also use your voice to do various commands with your computer. I honestly have not used it like that, but if you click on Get More Info About Dictation, you can learn more that way. Using voice to text, I'm going to go ahead and click the toggle for Turn on Speech Recognition and open up a word processor here. And then to use it, all you got to do is click the microphone. And if I start talking a bit, it'll eventually turn my voice into text. Ta-da! I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for now. As you can see, it's not quite right. There are options for training the voice to text to help its accuracy. One word of note is you do need to be connected to the internet in order to use this option. And I think Windows 11 might even force you to log in. Nonetheless, definitely very cool if you're a bad typist or have trouble with your fingers. Next up is keyboard. Like I was saying earlier, if you're having hardware issues, you could go ahead and toggle on the on-screen keyboard and get by that way. If you do not have a touchscreen, you're going to be stuck using your mouse, which isn't particularly effective, but again, it works in a pinch. Below that, we have a few other options, including the infamous sticky keys and filter keys. Sticky keys make shortcuts work one key at a time. Filter keys make it so you can't use repeated keystrokes. I've seen both of these options accidentally turned on in the lab multiple times, and it becomes very difficult to type if you don't know what's going on. And if you see the shortcuts underneath the toggles, you'll see how easy it is to accidentally turn on. For the sticky keys, it's just pressing Shift key 5 times, and I'll do that right now. It is nice that they give you a Windows warning as well as an audio cue. Nonetheless, our patrons in the lab don't understand what they're looking at, and they usually just click yes or okay, and then proceed to have some trouble. So there's checkboxes underneath all the toggles to turn the shortcuts off. If you do find yourself constantly turning these things on by accident, that might be something to consider. Keep scrolling down and you see we have the options for showing you the warning and giving you the audio cue that you are about to use these options that you probably turned on by accident. Next is the mouse. This option is for using the number pad in place of your mouse. Typically it's turned off by default, but if you turn it on, I'm going to go ahead and use the 4 and 6 keys on my numpad to move the cursor left and right. And there you go. As you can see, the sliders are both set to fast. If you set it somewhere in the middle, I'm going to once again use the 4 and 6 keys to move my cursor left and right. It is a lot slower. So if you were having mouse issues and you needed to use the mouse pad, you're probably going to want to set these sliders up kind of high. So after the mouse, we've got eye control, which requires an eye tracking device, and I'm not prepared to talk about, so that is all I've got for ease of access. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about arranging things on your desktop and taskbar. To create a shortcut to an application on your desktop, what you do is go to the Start menu, find an application you want to make a shortcut to, let's say the calculator application, and just click and drag over the desktop and release. And now we have a shortcut to the calculator application. If we open up the Start menu again, there's some other things we can do. For example, if we right-click on the calculator and select Pin to Start, that will create a tile over in the tile section of the Start menu. That's for Windows 10. In Windows 11, it will put the application on the first window of the Start menu. Otherwise, applications live on the second screen. In both cases, to get it off, all you do is right-click and select Unpin from Start. One more thing we can do here is right-click on the calculator, go to More, and select Pin to Taskbar. When I do that, sure enough, the application is pinned to the taskbar. I actually recommend doing that for things that you use a lot, because clicking on applications in the taskbar opens with a single click, whereas on the desktop it takes a double click. It's just a preference. To get the application off the taskbar, you just right click on it, select Unpin from Taskbar, and it's gone. To create a shortcut of a file or folder on the desktop, it's a piece of cake. All you do is open up a folder. Let's say we'll make a shortcut to this captures folder. It takes 2 steps. First thing you do is create the shortcut by right-clicking, selecting Create Shortcut, and then we click and drag the shortcut over to the desktop. And we have a shortcut to our folder. So the original folder still lives where it did before. This icon on the desktop is just a shortcut to that original folder. If we were to drag the shortcut over to the recycling bin and then empty the recycling bin, we don't actually delete everything, we just delete the shortcut. Everything else in that captures folder still stays there in its home spot. Now we can go ahead and drag the original folder over to the desktop, so now everything lives on the desktop, but I generally recommend not doing that because having things live on your desktop in general is just a bad idea. To move it back, just click and drag and put it back to its home spot. And there we go. If you wanted to create a new folder on your desktop, you can do that as well. Just right click, select New, and then Folder. And we have a new folder on our desktop. And you can go ahead and treat that like any other folder. The desktop itself is just a folder that you can put files and folders into. It just looks different than all the rest of them. I'm going to click and drag that into the recycling bin to get rid of that. And that's all I wanted to cover there. So that's how to create shortcuts to your applications, folders, and files on the desktop, as well as create a shortcut on your taskbar. Now there's some things we can do to arrange things on our desktop. If you find an empty spot on your desktop, right click on it and then select View. You see there's a couple things we can do. You can change the size of your icons. If you choose large, they get huge. And this works on top of that option in the ease of access to make everything bigger, so you can make your icons even bigger still. I'm going to set it to small icons, where if you have a whole lot on your desktop and you have good eyes, this can give you a bit more space for more stuff. I'm going to go back to medium icons. You also notice by default everything kind of locks into a grid. I personally like this because it keeps anything from getting on top of something else and keeps everything kind of clean. But if you wanted to get rid of that grid behavior, you can go to View and then uncheck Align Icons to Grid. And now you can stack things on top of each other. make it into a pretty picture or whatever. But if you do that, again, things get hidden and can just generally get messy if you accidentally drag things around. So I'd recommend not using it. I'm going to turn it back on. You can also make all the icons go away by unchecking Show Desktop Icons. I'm not sure why you need to do that, but it's there. I'm going to check that again. You also have options to sort your icons. So if we go sort by, you can do the typical name, size, type, and date modified. If you choose name, it throws everything over on the left side by alphabetical order. If you move things out of place and you don't want that to necessarily happen, what you can do is right click, view auto arrange icons, and now everything will always go back to its original spot. And that is a few ways you can arrange things on your desktop. So next, I'd like to have a quick look at how to customize your view of the File Explorer. File Explorer is the application you use to view your folders and files. By default, it should be on your taskbar. It's this little folder guy here. Otherwise, anytime you try to open up a folder, you're using the File Explorer. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up and maximize it. And first off, what you may want to do is in the upper right corner, we've got a little kind of caret here. If you click on that, it will maximize your ribbon. So you can click on that little arrow to minimize and maximize your ribbon there. If you need the screen space, minimizing it might be what you want to do. From here, I want to look at the View tab. So we're already in there. You can have a look at the other tabs if you like. Otherwise, in this View tab, I'm going to go from left to right and show you what everything does. We'll start off with the navigation pane. The navigation pane is this section on the left here, and it shows you your folder structure as well as any pinned folders and files that you have. If I click on the navigation pane and select navigation pane and you uncheck that, it goes away. Check it again and we can see it. And again, you can float through your folders with this navigation pane. I generally prefer to have that there. Next to that, we've got the Preview and Details pane. The Preview pane in particular can be really helpful for looking for files if you didn't want to actually open things up. So as I click on each file here, you see you get a preview of the content. Again, a nice shortcut so you don't have to open everything up one file at a time. The Details pane will instead give you details about the file. You can still kind of see a little bit of a preview, but it's really small. I'm going to click on that again to get rid of that. After that, we've got the layout. If you roll over each one, it'll give you a preview. This is extremely helpful if you're going through hundreds and hundreds of photos and you don't want to open each one up to see what they are, or if you're looking for duplicates. If you choose large or extra large icons, you can see the content ahead of time and do your comparisons that way without having to open them up. Very useful. I've used this with lots of patrons for helping clear their hard drive space from various like photos, videos, and things like that. Because this is a videos folder, I'm going to leave it on large icons for now. Next to that, we have sort by. We've got all the usual suspects here. Depending on what you're looking for, you can choose how to look for it in a bunch of different ways. I'm just going to leave that for now. And the next one is group by. I do not particularly care for this. If you choose one of these, it creates lines in between various groups. I'm going to see if I can find a better folder to demonstrate here. Group by, how about authors? No, group by size? There we go. So we have all these lines here. They weren't in previous versions of Windows, or at least the earlier versions, so I'm not used to seeing them, and it just helps me keep everything straight by getting rid of it. So you go to group by and then select none. That gets rid of those. Otherwise, if you want to group them, that's how you can do it. I believe the download folders by default is sorted by date. So again, I always choose to group it by none. After that, we've got a couple of checkboxes here. We've got item checkboxes. Typically, I select files and folders with the Control key, but if you don't like doing that, you can use checkboxes instead, and this lets you pick and choose what you select with checkboxes on the left side. I am going to uncheck the checkboxes. Next one is file name extensions. I always have this one selected by preference here. I do this because quite oftentimes I will have files with the same name but different extensions. For example, I've actually created a little demonstration here in the Documents folder where I have a file saved as two different types, but it's the same name. So doc1.docx and doc1.pdf. Now you can tell the difference between them by the icons, which will show which applications open them up, but I don't necessarily trust that, and sometimes they're the same. So again, if you see the file name extensions, you can tell one from the other. The last one is hidden items. This will show you things that if you don't know what you're doing, you probably shouldn't see. So it's usually system folders and files. If I go to our C drive here, you see some that are kind of faded out. Those are hidden folders. Again, if you don't know what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be looking at them. So again, if I click and unclick it, they go away. So like I was saying before, over in our navigation pane, we can see folders and files that are pinned. So if there's a folder in particular that you know you're going to be using a lot, you might want to pin it to your quick access. For example, right now, I am putting my videos as I'm working on them in the Done folder. So if I wanted to pin that to quick access, what I can do is right click on it, and then there it is, pin to quick access. When I do that, you see a little pin goes on the Done folder, and it will stay there on the left side. If you want to get rid of your pinned folder, you just right click on it and unpin from quick access. There we go. And for now, that's all I want to look at as far as customizing your views of the File Explorer. Next, I'd like to look at personalization. There's a couple of ways to get to those options. One way is to right-click on the desktop and choose Personalize. Another way is to click on the Start menu, click on Settings, click on Personalization. And we'll just have a look at this list on the left side here. We start off on the desktop background. So by default, we're showing a picture. You can go ahead and choose any one of the default pictures, or you can click Browse, go through your folders, and find a picture of your own. I don't have anything ready, so I'm just going to cancel out of that. If you click on the drop down here, you can also choose a solid color. So set to red. I'm not a big fan of that. You can also choose custom color if you want to pick your own colors. Otherwise, you can also choose slideshow, where you can select a folder and Windows will go ahead and just go through the photos in that folder one by one. You can choose how often they change, from 1 minute to 1 day, and you've got some other options here for shuffling and whatnot. I'm going to set this back to picture. You can also choose a fit. If your image is very small, very large, or has weird dimensions, you may need to fiddle with this to get it to look acceptable. If I were to change this to center and have a look, you might remember that there was a lot more to this picture than just this. Apparently this is a fairly large image, so I'm going to go back to settings, choose to fit to fill, and now we can see the whole image. So that's the desktop background. Next is colors. So we're already set to a custom view right now. So Windows is in dark mode where apps are in light mode. If we were to set everything to dark mode, everything turns dark. If we choose light mode, everything turns light, including the taskbar that was darker before. I'm going to set things back to the way they were. You also have transparency effects, which, like I mentioned before, you can turn off to get a little extra processing power if you're having trouble with an older computer. Below that, we have accent colors. You can either choose to automatically pick a color from the background. So if you have like a background that's more red or purple or whatever, it'll set the accent color to something red or purple. Otherwise, you can manually choose a color from the list here or select a custom color like we chose with the background before. I'm going to go ahead and set the accent color to green. And you may notice when I did that, we've got a little selection rectangle here and underneath the taskbar icons that are now green instead of default blue. If you want to see your accent color a little bit more, you can go ahead and click these checkboxes to see it in a few extra places. Come on. There we go. So now when I open up the notepad here, you'll notice that the title bar is also green. I'm going to set all that back. And we'll move on to the lock screen. The lock screen is the screen that shows up after you lock your computer, or perhaps you've got a timer to lock your screen, which is a good idea if you're using your computer in a public place. By default, it shows the Windows Spotlight in the background, which I believe are Microsoft curated images off the internet. I actually kind of like these, so I leave it, but otherwise you can also do a picture or slideshow like we did with the background before. For a detailed status of your apps, you can go ahead and choose something in this next section here. I believe even in Windows 11, this is still kind of in the developmental stages, so there's not a whole lot there. For quick statuses, you can go ahead and click on any of these plus signs here and choose any of the available apps here. If you have more apps downloaded from the store, you might have more options. Otherwise, you can also choose to keep your picture on your lock screen, or your sign-in screen rather. Otherwise, if you turn it off, I believe you just get the plain old blue Windows screen. Below that, some more options I'd like to take a look at. We've got the screen timeout settings, which we leave on our laptops as never, straight through, so nothing ever times out on our patrons. If you're using a laptop, I would strongly recommend setting something for your battery power for both your screen and for going to sleep. Maybe 5 minutes for your screen, 15 minutes for sleep, and this will just help you conserve your battery a bit. Plugged in, that's up to you. The reason you might want to set something for when you're plugged in is, again, if you're using your laptop in public, you want it to go to sleep a little faster, so it's a little less vulnerable. I'm going to set these back to never. And go back. And the last option here for lock screen is the screensaver. Now, screensavers are kind of a thing of the past. They were designed to keep your screen from developing burn-in, but it's still available on Windows 10. If you want to go ahead and set something, it's set to Mystify. We'll preview it. And if you've been around more than 20 years, you've probably seen this before. So you can set how long it takes for the screensaver to kick in. And again, there's a whole bunch of other options here. And, you know, it's just something you can set for your own personal preference. Again, it used to be for burn-in issues, but that's not really an issue with current technology. Cancel out of that. I'm actually going to skip over themes. There's not really anything here that we haven't discussed already. And if you haven't downloaded more themes from the store, you probably don't have much to look at here. Fonts is where you'd go to download more fonts. You don't actually set anything here, though. And next we've got the start menu options. There's a couple things here maybe worth having a look at. Showing more tiles. Again, I've got this off, and honestly, nobody really uses tiles in Windows 10. And in Windows 11, they're not even a thing, which is why I chose to skip over them today. You can also turn off the app list in the start menu. I'm not sure why you do that, but now if you do this, we don't see the apps anymore. Instead, you got to click on this All Apps icon, and then you'll see a bit more. We're going to leave that on. Recently added and most used apps, if you set those on, now at the top you can see which apps were added most recently and which you use the most. I'm not sure who's using the game bar. But I think you get the idea of what these all do. The Start Full Screen is actually from Windows 8. This will cover your screen in tiles. Again, tiles aren't really a thing anymore, although if you're using Windows Server 2012, maybe you're used to seeing that. But again, I'm going to leave that off and move on to the taskbar. Now again, there's a bunch of things worth looking at here, and I actually prefer the Windows 10 taskbar to the Windows 11 taskbar because it's a lot more versatile. First option here is lock the taskbar. If I turn that off, I can now move the taskbar all over the place. In Windows 11, the taskbar is stuck to the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and lock the taskbar back. Another option is to hide the taskbar, which can give you a little extra screen space, and I've actually used this on previous videos. Turn that off. Use small taskbar buttons. Get you a little more space without getting rid of the taskbar altogether. If you want to keep the taskbar locked but change its location, we've got the options to do that. And then there's also adding labels to your taskbar icons, which does this. I usually leave that off because I don't need the labels. The notification area is the area on the right side of the taskbar. You can choose what appears there and what gets hidden underneath the little caret. So if I start turning these options on, you'll notice they appear over on the right side. Otherwise, when you turn them off, they're still there. They're just underneath the caret. I'm going to go back. Turn system icons on or off. Similar. In fact, there's a lot of overlap here. I would usually leave most of these on anyway, but if you start turning them on, you see they appear. Turn them off and they go away. That's all those are. And that is all I have for... Oh, no, we want to look at the news and interests. I personally don't like having the news and interests on my taskbar, and because I'm not connected to the internet, we can't really goof around with it too much. But if I turn it on, you'll see you get the weather, and if I was connected to the internet and I rolled over it, you'd get a whole bunch of information like local news, traffic, and things like that. But again, because I'm not connected to the internet, I get an error instead. It's a nice little thing. I personally just want to save the extra bandwidth, as little as it is. But you have some more options to show what happens as you use that. But I'm going to turn it off. It goes away. And now I can say we're done with the taskbar options. Okay, so I'd like to have a look at some customization options in the system settings, look at how to set our default apps, and then we'll call it a day. To look at the system settings, you use the Start menu, click on Settings, click on System, and there we go. So first we're going to look at the display heading under the system settings. You might recall we had a display heading underneath the Ease of Access category as well. I'm not sure why the options are different here, but the one I want to look at is the night light, which is right underneath the brightness slider right here. The whole point of the night light is it's supposed to reduce the amount of blue light being emitted from your display, which can help with your circadian rhythms and help you fall asleep more easily at night. I personally am a night owl, so I do not use this. So if you toggle this on, again, your display should reduce the amount of blue light that it emits. Now, I happen to know this effect does not come through on the recording, so you're going to have to try it out on your own to see how it works. I'm going to click on Nightlight Settings here, and this is where you can adjust the strength of the effect. When I set this up to 100, my display turns like a dark pink, and because I'm not getting any blue light at all, the sliders and toggles and all that actually appear black. So because this kind of hurts my eyes, I'm going to set the strength down a bit. And below that, we have the ability to schedule when the nightlight turns on. Ideally, you would set the schedule so if you lose track of time, you'll know what time it is when your nightlight kicks in. If you have location services turned on, you can actually have the nightlight automatically kick on during sunset and then turn off during sunrise. Otherwise, you can set the hours manually. I'm going to go back, turn this off, and next have a quick look at sound. And the only reason I want to peek at sound is this is where you would go if you're having issues with your output devices. So if you have Bluetooth speakers or headphones and you're not getting the sound out of them, this would be where you'd go to make sure that it's coming out of the right spot. This would be a drop-down menu, but because I don't have any other options, that's all it's there. Same goes for your microphone. If you have a separate microphone and you're having trouble using it with Zoom or Teams or whatever, you can come here and set the input device, and maybe that'll help. Usually you can set this within the apps themselves, but if you're having issues, this is another place to look. Next up is the notifications and actions. This is where you can set what notifications you receive and which apps can send them. I usually set this to off so they don't disturb our patrons, but if you set getting notifications from apps and senders on, you can go ahead and check and uncheck whatever options and apps you want to hear from. I'm going to set this back off. And the last thing I want to look at here is Focus Assist. Now, if you were to have notifications on, what Focus Assist does is turn the notifications off in certain circumstances. So if we scroll to the bottom here, you'll see the rules you can set. So Focus Assist will kick in automatically if you're playing a game or if you are duplicating your display, kind of implying that you're giving a presentation. You can also set a schedule. So if you didn't want to get notifications in your sleep, this would be where you would set that. You can either have the Focus Assist off, set the priority only or alarms only. If you set priority only, go to customize your priority list. You can select the applications that can actually interrupt your focus time. So if you click the plus sign here, you can choose the apps that will interrupt you during your Focus Assist time. But that's it for that. Alright, so now let's look at how to set our default apps. To do that, we're going to go to the Start menu, click on Settings, click on Apps, and then click on Default Apps. From here, there's actually a couple ways to go about setting your default apps. The first way is with this screen here. So you'll notice there's a bunch of various functions of your computer along with an application associated with those functions. So for example, for Photo Viewer, we've got the Photos app. What this means is anything that Windows considers an image file will open with the Photos app. So anything with a .bmp, .png, .jpeg, those will all attempt to open with Photos. If you wanted to change the application associated with all of those file extensions, you just click on the application. Windows will give you a whole list of applications it thinks is up to the task. Just go ahead and pick one from the list. And all of the file extensions will now be associated with the application that you selected. A popular one to change here is the web browser. By default, that's set to Microsoft Edge. Just click on that. Choose another web browser, and now you can surf the web with Google Chrome. If you wanted to reset all your default apps, you can just click the reset button, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, we've got a couple of other options here. The first one I want to look at is choose default apps by file type. So rather than setting one application to open all of the associated file extensions, you can choose by individual file extension. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and it's going to pull up a screen with the entire list of file extensions that your computer is aware of. It's going to take a minute. There's a couple hundred of them, and it's in alphabetical order. So let's say, a popular one people like to change is PDFs. If you wanted to change the application that opens PDFs, you can go ahead and scroll down to the P's, and where it says PDF, Windows will usually set it to Microsoft Edge by default, but if you wanted to say use Adobe Acrobat, go ahead and use that instead. And now anything with a PDF extension will open with Adobe Acrobat. One other way you can set your default apps is by app, which actually might be easier. So you click on Set Defaults by App, and then rather than looking at the whole list of file extensions, you're looking at the list of all your apps. And if you choose an app and choose Manage, you'll see all the file extensions that Windows thinks that app can open. So here you see PDF. It's already set to Adobe Acrobat, but this probably would have been a quicker way to go about finding it. And with that, I think we're done. I thank you for viewing. I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a good day.